Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com today. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Dr. Ashley Sloat. She is a patent agent and president of Aurora Consulting LLC, helping companies build robust and valuable patent portfolios. So how did a PhD in biomedical sciences get into the patent world? And what's a patent agent anyway? So let's just jump right into it. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Ashley.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again. So from the intro that I just provided, I mentioned that you have a PhD in biomedical sciences, but I suspect you had to go through undergrad first. So I'm curious, what was the motivation for your undergraduate major and also the motivation to get a PhD?
Yeah, thank you. So I did my undergraduate degree in microbiology at North Dakota State University, and actually wanted to be a professor, or actually wanted to be an optometrist. That's why I went into microbiology, but then kind of fell in love with lab work through doing lab work at NDSU. And so then sought to do my PhD as a good way to get into the lab, and then got into the lab for a few years in grad school and loved it, but also it was very blinders on. You kind of are studying one complex, one set of cells for really heavily focusing, and I wanted to be able to expand beyond that. And so that's where I kind of started to look into alternative careers, which would include where I found myself, which was in the patent world.
Okay, so you actually knew about patents while you were in graduate school. That's pretty cool. I didn't learn about patents until many years after I started working. It wasn't even something I knew much about. What I guess when it came to even learning about patents, how did you learn about them?
Yeah, so I did a fellowship with the Office of Technology Transfer at the University of Michigan, where I did my PhD. And it was through that fellowship where I really started to understand the intersection of research into translational, into companies where, universities are trying to move technology out of the university. And so as part of that fellowship, we researched technologies that professors were doing. We looked at the patent landscape, we looked at the competitive landscape, and kind of what was the market for these different things they were innovating. And so that's where patents really got on my radar, was through that fellowship.
Okay. Well, I mentioned in the intro also that you're a patent agent, but I suspect there's a number of people that are listening or watching this conversation that have no idea what a patent agent is. So could you explain what a patent agent is?
Yeah, so there are two ways to get in to practice patent law in the United States. One is through what I would call maybe the more traditional path that people think of, which is a person goes to a bachelor's degree, they go to law school, and then they take a state bar to practice, contract law and things like that within their state. But then they also would maybe take a patent bar to practice patent law in front of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And so that's your typical patent attorney path. For a patent agent, usually we have some kind of advanced technical degree. Not always. I mean, you can become a patent agent with a bachelor's, but many of us that found our way into this world did a master's or a PhD. And then we also took the patent bar like a patent attorney did. We just didn't do the law school route. And so we are, I would say, highly specialized for the patent space, and don't then do contract law, of course, or trademarks and things of that nature. But like I said, highly specialized for the patent world. We took the patent bar like everybody else, can practice. We work with clients internationally, nationally. So can really do anything that a patent attorney can, except for, just that patent portfolio piece of it.
Okay. I do know a number of people who got PhDs, and then they started working at law firms as technical advisors, even became patent agents while they were there. But then the law firm paid for them to go to law school so that they would become that patent attorney. Is that something you ever considered?
Yeah, a little bit, but honestly, the thought of more school makes me makes me makes me anxious that, like, I've done so much school already, and so to go back and do more school does not really sound appealing to me. If there were a world where an apprenticeship, if I said I want to do these other kinds of law and I want to learn, I don't care about real estate, I don't care about contracts, I just want to be able to do all IP or something like that, and I could do an apprenticeship to do it, that I would be interested in. But the idea of, 3-4 years of school, more school after I've already had, gosh, a lot. that does not sound super appealing to me. So
Understood. I believe in California, it actually is possible to sit for the California State Bar exam without having gone to law school, and the way to do it is essentially an apprenticeship with a practicing attorney. Apparently, it's a bit of an involved process. You have to have the state bar involved to make sure that whatever you're learning is sufficient to be able to sit for the state bar. But I believe it is possible. In fact, uh, from what I understand, Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer, but he never went to law school, and that's how he eventually became a lawyer. Was
oh,
due to an apprenticeship.
oh, I had no idea. That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to know that there are paths like that available, at least in some states. And well, yeah, that's cool. Maybe I'll have to look more into it.
Yeah, but the rest of the states, they're not with that. They say go to law school.
Well, I have heard that the California bar is one of the hardest bar exams. So they probably feel like it's going to be a good weeder, no matter what. So maybe that's why.
Oh, 100%. From what I understand, I think people that take that route, only about 30% of them pass the bar. So it's
Yeah,
not.
it'd be really tough because I know like attorneys who've gone to law school and worked at firms and study, like all summer to take those things, so I bet it'd be hard to apprentice and be successful at the California bar.
Yeah, but I hear you on having to go back to school. I mean, I've known some people who did that part time, so they go in at nights. It took them about 4 years to do law school. Just
Yeah.
the idea of doing law school at night and then having your regular job, and it takes a lot of discipline and focus. And so if you're able to do it, hey, kudos to you.
Yeah, all power to the zealots.
No doubt. All right. So I mentioned that you founded Aurora Consulting. So what was the motivation to found your firm?
So I actually, give a lot of hats off to Jessica Hudak, who was after my fellowship at the Technology Transfer Office at U of M during my PhD, and then shortly after my PhD, I basically, went to work for a woman who had started her own firm. And so that was Hudak Consulting Group. And so she kind of apprenticed me kind of in the space. And at, a few years in, it became apparent that she wanted to go down another path. And so we basically worked out an agreement for me to take over her firm, rebrand it, rename it, do that. And so that's kind of was the birthing of Aurora. And it wasn't an easy decision to do it because I don't think anybody ever feels ready to start their own company, whether it's a tech company, a firm, or whatever the case may be. I don't think you ever feel ready. And so I love flexibility. I love life flexibility. I love working with inventors and learning about new technology. And so this was like a perfect avenue to do it. So I basically thought about it for a year before deciding that what's the harm in trying, right? If I fail miserably, I can just, drastically change career paths and do something different. If I'm successful at it, then, I will be glad I took the plunge. And so it was really just, in terms of deciding, it was kind of opportunity to do it, met desire to do it, and, perfect storm of just, why not? And I'm a very independent person. And so it's a great opportunity for me to kind of flourish in that way because I don't, I like to just be very independent, and so it's been fun to kind of build something that I really enjoy and the structure that I really want it to be and not be confined by others.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and kudos to you for taking that plunge. There's so many people out there that have all these ideas, and some of them are more than willing to tell you all about these ideas. But do these ideas ever become something? But you actually you made that decision to go into business for yourself. So I mean, yeah, I commend people that make those type of decisions. So when it comes to the work that you do with Aurora Consulting, what type of clients do you tend to work with?
Yeah, so I think actually it overlaps with a lot of the clients that you're seeking to work with, Neil, with Teach the Geek is, it's young companies, right, that are either solo inventors to a few members strong, those companies that are in some part of the funding life cycle, pre-seed, seed, some kind of series financing. So it's a lot of companies that are in that group of innovation, or in that cycle of innovation. We do have a few more established companies that are either beyond financing rounds or in very, very late stages of financing. But I would say the vast majority of our clientele is within that early stage, and primarily in the most areas that we touch are, biomedical, medical devices, either software enabled or not, software, consumer products. We've gotten like quite a bit of fitness clients in recent history. And even some, biotech. So we do stretch into the biotech space a little bit as well.
Okay. And what type of work do you do for your clients?
Anything from, kind of figuring out whether they should file a patent application, because it's not, as you probably know, it's not always the right path for every single company, every single product. And then, if we determine that filing a patent application is the appropriate path, we do searching with them, patentability, landscape searching. We do drafting the patent applications, filing. We do US filings. We do international filings with partners in all the countries that you can think of, and maintenance of portfolios. And, we help them, we support diligence activities when they are looking at investment. We do partner with law firms on an as-needed basis for certain aspects of portfolio management stuff that maybe requires a little bit more of an attorney's purview into it. So really anything for the patent portfolio that a client might need.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. When it comes also to the clients that you work with, how do they, is it that they find you or you find them? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think most, so historically, law has been a very referral-based business. And so that has historically been the vast majority of our business has been referral-based. One client likes working with us, they tell another client. And post-COVID or during COVID, we kind of decided to figure out how you build trust without meeting with people, because COVID, obviously changed a lot of things. And so we really, really ramped up a lot of our business development that wasn't in-person meet and greets and things like that. And so that included, our podcast, for inventor education. It included our, a lot of speaking events, but through webinars and Zoom meetings and things like that. It included a lot of social stuff. And so that actually has, has a very long tail, but that actually has been finally bearing fruit. We've, been building trust with people online, and that has, started yielding people finding us through our website and things like that. But I would still say it's primarily referral based, but we do still are getting more interactions through our web presence.
Yeah, when it comes to people finding you, you're right. It is kind of a long-term strategy, and for people who are impatient, possibly probably not the most comfortable strategy for sure. But as long as it bears fruit eventually, well, that's the goal. Well,
Exactly.
I was like, this couldn't have happened yesterday. Like, damn. But yeah,
Exactly.
but yeah, for referrals is always best. But I suspect that with all companies, at some point you have to think, well, I mean, referrals are great, but we have no control over the referrals. But we do have control over what we put out there. So you mentioned you have a podcast. You mentioned you do webinars. Well, you control whether you put out a podcast or not. You control whether you do webinars or not. You control whether you do speaking engagements or not. And that's, I mean, ultimately that's if we focus on the things we can control, and maybe we can sleep better at night, but as opposed to thinking
Exactly.
about all
You
the
can
other
fit the
things.
schedule needed.
100%. Actually, when I first started this podcast, and even to this day, it has been about my own struggles giving presentations in front of people. At least originally, when I had to give presentations as an engineer and working at a medical device company, I had to do it on a monthly basis, and those first few presentations were terrible. And I knew they were
Everybody
terrible.
says.
No, I knew they were terrible, and I knew they were terrible because I would get questions afterwards that I thought I had answered during the presentation. But so obviously I wasn't putting things in a way that the people in the audience could understand. You would have thought I would have learned my lesson after that first presentation, or the second, or the third, but I didn't. It took actually quite a while for me to actually get the point that maybe this is something I need to get better at. But so when it comes to yourself and speaking in front of others, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
Yeah, it is a hard, and I completely agree with you, Neil. It's a very hard, it's a very essential skill to learn, but it's a very hard skill to learn. And it's hard also for people to learn it because that we don't learn the same way. But for me, I'm like a very off the cuff kind of speaker. I'm not like a typical notes in the speaker notes kind of speaker. And some of that came from, so my PhD mentor, the PI that I was under in my PhD work, he had us presenting, I swear it was like every week or every other week. We either had our journal club or our lab club, or our institute has something that we had to present at, or we had Notch Club that we had to present, so we did a lot of presenting, and he was a very good mentor. He was Swiss, he had the Swiss precision, so we were very, he was a good mentor in that in a lot of ways, but in the presentation realm. So that was partly, I think, of my training, is just Yvonne was very, we presented a lot in grad school. And so you really learned how to quickly put information together. And it's, obviously research data is highly pictorial. And so you're not putting a tons of words on slides. You're really having to stand there and say, here's my data, here's what it teaches, here's the conclusions. And so that was kind of the birth of it. As I've worked with my business partner, Josh Sloat, he has a different way of doing things, and that's been fun to learn from him as well. In in this world where the patent world is way more textual and way less pictorial. And so it's been a transition of my style a little bit, where I've had to start with a Google Doc and dumping a whole bunch of information in there, and then trying to find threads that make sense and then organize them into, and I never did that in grad school, right? It was dumping stuff into a presentation. But here and now it's like, okay, now I need to collect all the information, organize it. And then, then I usually have to give it a few times to see if it flows and see if it makes sense and see if I can speak to it in a rational way. And then if I can't, then it's like adding different pieces and refining it. So it's definitely been a change over time of how I've had to do it, given the type of information I've been presenting. But, it hasn't ever been easy for me either. It's just been, I'm comfortable in front of people. That's been easy. But learning how to present different kinds of information, that's been an evolution as the type of information has changed.
I hear what you're saying. And, when it comes to, especially when you're presenting in front of people who don't have the same level of expertise on the subject that you do, then speaking off the cuff might be tough, because it comes out as it comes out. And if it doesn't come out in a way that people can really understand, well, then that's how you end up with people looking at their phones or thinking about what they're going to have for lunch, which is what I tend to do sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's hard too, because you got to think about, and this is where it's nice to have teammates that are at different levels in the patent world, because, I think you probably appreciate this too. It's hard to take a step back and say, if I didn't know all these things, what is the question I'd ask as an on-ramp? And I think it's really hard to do that when you're so deep in it. So having teammates that will listen to presentations when they're still rough form and ask those questions that, may surprise you and maybe cause you to say, oh, okay, well, I guess I thought people were here, but really they're over here. So I need to bring them more along in the journey. I think that's really critical too. And, and how to figure that out, how to step back and determine that. I think that's hard, but I think it's a really critical part of presenting.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely something that I came to understand eventually when I was giving those presentations in front of management. Many of them weren't technical. I had to give these technical presentations. They're asking these questions afterwards that I thought I had answered. And I had to realize, well, they're not the same level. They're not the same level as you, Neil. You can't be using a whole bunch of jargon. You can't use a whole lot of these acronyms that you thought, whoa, what do you mean you don't know what that means? Of course they don't know what that means. They're not in the same group. They're not in the same field as you. You didn't always know what those acronyms meant. I think also we used to have empathy for people, because how many times have you been in a presentation where someone is talking using a whole bunch of jargon you didn't understand, or a whole bunch of acronyms you didn't understand? You were thinking to yourself, man, I wish they would explain things a little better. But then you give a presentation, you do the same damn thing.
Exactly. Yeah, shoes on the other foot. Now who's doing it right?
Yeah, 100%. Another thing that, well, at least when I first started giving presentations is I used to get pretty nervous before them, especially when I had to give presentations in front of management. We're talking CEO, CTO, CMO, C fill in the blank O, all the C's. So do you ever get nervous before giving presentations? And if so, what do you do to manage your nerves?
That's a great question. I do a little bit. It depends on how much I've rehearsed, sometimes for sure, right? How like comfortable I feel with the material. And so the more I can practice for those bigger meetings that are more consequential, I think that helps with nerves. But then also just, I think some of it is convincing myself or feeling confident in my skill level, and knowing that and kind of reminding myself that these people may be experts in certain areas, but they're not experts maybe in my area, and I'm speaking to them from my area of expertise, and so I shouldn't be nervous because I am the expert in this area, right? And so kind of giving yourself a pep talk a little bit about it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the other thing you can do is just repetition, right? The more you do those big meetings, the more you walk in there and you maybe feel a little fluttery for the first 5 minutes, but then you kind of get your groove on, and then you kind of forget that you were nervous in the first place. But yeah, it's person dependent, but I would say, the more you can practice, the more you can do those presentations, and just reminding yourself that a lot of times you're in those situations because somebody's asked you to, and that you're the expert.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I'm the expert. I'm the expert.
Today.
And then you get into the presentation and you realize maybe during the question and answer period that these people are asking some pretty pointed questions. They might actually be an expert.
Yeah, exactly. But I would give myself a pep talk before the meeting.
Yeah, for sure. I think I need to give myself a pep talk right now during this Q&A.
Yeah, exactly.
Ashley, this has been a great conversation. Well, one last question. When it comes to the people who are looking at this presentation or looking at this conversation or listening or watching it, what's one tip that you could give them to become more effective at presenting in front of others or public speaking generally?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, practice. The more you do it, just find opportunities to practice. I mean, I can't tell you how many, I feel like, if you, especially in bigger cities, you could do tons of pitch competitions. There's, lunch and learns that companies are looking for, and there's, startups that are looking for advice and things like that. So, if you're willing to give your time, which I think that's the best thing you can do to kind of build business or make connections and learn, is just do lots of it, like be willing to. And that's like, we try to be very giving with our time for inventor education. We do lots of free events, like Free My Time, with tons of different organizations that do inventor education, because we think it's so critical for inventors to kind of have that in their back pocket. And so just be giving of your time and willing to do those presentations. But I would also read. There's lots of good books out there around. There's Smart Brevity, which is by the Axios founders. There's pitch presentation books and things like that. Like, read through them and try to try different things, try different styles, like do some A/B testing, right? Of, I'm going to make my presentation this way this time, try this different advice from this one book, see how it goes, see how it lands with people, and adjust it. Because, especially pitching, which I don't have much experience in, is a very hard, it's a very short time frame. You got to pack a lot of information in, but you have to make it very approachable. There's a very particular skill set that you're looking for. And so just, try different things, implement different things, and see how it goes. So that'd be my advice. Just lots of practice, and don't be afraid to learn from others that have been doing this a lot.
Yeah, 100%. This has been great, Ashley. Thank you so much for being a guest. How can people get in touch with you?
Thanks, Neil. No, it's been awesome. I appreciate your having me on. So you can find us at Aurora Patents. That's AuroraPatents.com. And like I said, you can find our podcast for inventor education, which is the Patently Strategic podcast, on all the major platforms. But you can contact me through our website, but you can also find me on socials, Ashley R. Sloat through LinkedIn and things like that.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Ashley.
Take care, Neil.